There are multiple types of pan knobs, and your DAW may be defaulting to the wrong one. If you're just panning stereo tracks willy-nilly without checking which type of pan knob you're using, you could be losing up to 50% of the musical information in your stereo tracks. So let's look at mono pan knobs, balance knobs, and stereo pan knobs so you know what each one does and when to use them. Let's do it. It's important to use the same terminology as everybody else in the industry, or you end up making the same kind of mistake that I made in the previous video, which is, in my old music crew, when we talked about balance, we were talking about symmetrical weight in the side channels. So if you panned an instrument over here, you might want to toss one over here to get that symmetry of weight. That is not what balance means to everybody else. Balance means you're getting the correct relative volume levels between individual music tracks in your total mix. Let me show you how the confusion arises and why it matters in relation to these pan knobs. So keep that in mind as we keep talking about this, and keep this in mind, which is most analog mixing consoles are just a series of mono channels, right? Most microphones are mono, most instruments are mono, and when it comes to mono, panning works very simply. When we're talking about mono tracks that are center panned with their position right up the phantom center, that means both of your speakers are pumping the sound equally, which makes it appear in the center. And when you want to move that position and shift it throughout the panorama, all you do is turn the pan knob. The question is, what's actually going on behind the scenes? So let's say you're panning to the left. I know this is mirror image, but what's actually happening, if you watch your meters, you're going to see the right speaker's volume starts decreasing as you pan further left until ultimately you're hard panned and that right speaker gets muted. But what you're also going to notice is the volume in the left speaker creeps up just a hair, about 3 decibels. This is due to the pan law, so that you don't start losing volume as you pan. It stays stable. You have to compensate because you're losing the power of an entire speaker. Turns out 3 decibels is what you need. Let me show you how this works here on the computer. So what we have here in this yellow track is right now just a hi-hat, and it's right up the center. And I want to show you what happens when you pan in mono. Not only listen as I push to the left, but also watch the meter here on the yellow track. Now we're going to the right. Cool, right? What you're going to notice on the meter is the volume stays stable as we pan, even though we're losing half of the power because we're muting a speaker. That's because I have a global pan law set up for pan knobs that compensates by the exact amount of decibels needed to keep that stable as we move it around. That's how it works in mono, and although you can't see it on the meters because there's only one channel, what's happening is the volume in the right speaker is getting muted as you pan further and further left. That's your basic panning in mono. So this is where the terminology can get confusing, because although what we're achieving is a visual balance in the stereo field as we pan, it's the volume balancing that even allows you to pan in the first place. So just remember, balance refers to volumes, not left and right in the stereo field. It's not panning. So the reason I'm harping on and on about balance is because when you go to create a stereo track in your DAW, like in Logic Pro here, look at the blue track. This is stereo. It's going to default to a balance knob. Now, a balance knob in stereo functions exactly like a pan knob does in mono. So the names aren't the same, and it's doubly confusing because look at your other option. It's a stereo pan. And you might think, well, mono pan and stereo pan are doing the same thing. They're not. Not only are they not doing the same thing, they don't function the same way behind the scenes. So this is also another point of confusion. I'm going to show you what a balance knob does. Before we do that, see if you can wrap your head around this. A stereo balance knob behaves exactly like a mono pan knob, not like a stereo pan knob. A stereo pan knob behaves just like two independent mono pan knobs. Why is this? I'm going to show you. But look, if you choose the wrong one, a balance instead of a stereo pan or vice versa, you could be making a huge mistake in your mix. Remember when I was saying mixing consoles usually are just a series of mono channels? Well, the question becomes, how do they deal with stereo tracks? What they do is they take the left track and they throw it in one channel, they take the right track and put it in the next one, and then they hard pan them in opposite directions. And that's what I've reproduced here in these green tracks. We're going to hard pan our hi-hats to the left, and I'm introducing a snare and we're pushing it to the right, and this is what it sounds like. Now, you typically wouldn't be doing this with drums like this. This would be like a piano where the bass is in the left and the treble's in the right, because you've got like a calibrated mic pair in an XY configuration and they're pointing, in the opposite directions. Or you got a mic on an acoustic guitar neck and you got another one on the body. That's how you end up with a true stereo track. So we could talk about our piano, but imagine a stereo mic and you got a person here singing and a person here singing, and they're meant to be singing in unison together. And one of them's too loud, and you've also got the trim too high on that preamp, the gain's too low on the other. You load it into your console and you find out the center of that stereo track is way over here because somebody's too loud, the preamp was too quiet. So how do we fix this? On a console, you would just go to the faders, you'd take the side that was too loud, you'd bring it down, maybe push the quiet up, and you could pull that center back where it's supposed to be. In a DAW, you don't have two faders because you're not going to use two independent mono channels to create stereo. You're going to create a stereo track where you only have one fader. So how do we fix it there? Well, this is exactly what a balance knob does. A balance knob is not giving you the action of a pan knob. It's replicating the functionality of two faders. And I want to show that to you. Let me get over to this blue track. This is our hi-hats to the left and our snare to the right, but I've combined them into one stereo track. And to confirm, yes, we're on a balance knob. Watch what happens when we start panning. First, we're going to pan to the left and pay attention what happens to the snare in the right. It didn't do what you might expect. You actually just lost the snare because remember, a balance knob is just replicating two faders, and when you panned, all you did was turn the right one down. Let's push it to the right. Watch what happens to the snare and what happens to the hi-hats. We're back to center. So when you go hard right, you lose the left channel. We lost the hi-hats. That's what a balance knob is doing. It's not panning in the way you would expect it to in a mono channel. So what is this actually for? Well, remember, if you're recording the two vocalists and you've messed up your preamps and they're too loud, you're using the balance knob and you're using the balance of volumes to reposition the center of that track. This is not necessarily for panning, it's for balancing volumes and just eking the center of that image around. So here's the big mistake people are making is they go to create a stereo track and they don't realize it's defaulting to a balance knob. They don't even realize there's other types of pan knobs hidden behind this functionality. What they're expecting is you're going to reposition the stereo image, and they don't realize if they start panning a stereo track with a balance knob, they're actually just losing information in one channel or the other. So what's our other option? So obviously, if we want to do true panning of a true stereo track, we don't want to just attenuate volumes when we turn our little rotary dial. We want to move the position of the sound around without losing volume or information at all. Now, if you remember in a mixing console, we've got two mono tracks combined to create a stereo track. This is giving us two independent faders, which is what a balance knob does. But remember, we've also got two pan knobs. This is how we would achieve true stereo panning. Now, if you create a stereo track in Pro Tools, for instance, you're going to see two pan knobs on that stereo track, but Logic Pro, Cubase, Ableton, I think even Fruity Loops, none of them are going to give you two pan knobs. But obviously they have to give us the solution. What is it? Back in the day on Logic, you had to pull up the direction mixer plugin. That sucks because this is a very frequently used functionality. So what's the option? Logic Pro provides us with something called a stereo pan knob. So remember, a balance is giving us the functionality of the two faders. The stereo pan is giving us the functionality of the two pan knobs. And let me show you. Now, most people don't realize we're defaulting to balance. They don't even know that because they don't realize Logic has hidden another option here on the screen behind the pan knobs. If you right click, you get more options. I already spoiled this for you, but you can choose a stereo pan knob. Now look, all of a sudden it looks different. It looks different. This is a stereo pan knob. And you might say, hey, look at this green ring around this. That's cool. They give me a visual indicator that is different than a balance knob. That's not what the green ring is, and we're going to get to that in a second. But I want you to hear what a stereo pan knob does to our same blue stereo track. Hi-hats in the left, snare in the right. Listen this time, the difference. I'm going to start pushing this to the left. Pay attention to the snare again. So now check it out. We're hard panned all the way to the left, but instead of attenuating that volume of the right speaker, we just moved that image to the left and we kept the snare. We didn't lose it. That's the difference between a balance knob and a stereo pan. Let's push it to the right. Watch the snare come back to the right, and then the hi-hats will follow all the way back to the right. Now we're center. So we pushed everything to the right. That's great, but you might be thinking, cool, we can kind of create the width we want of this stereo track, but either the left channel is pinned to the left side and we can bring the right over, or the right channel's pinned and we can push the left over. So we can't really create a width up the center or even shift that width around. But we can. That's what that green ring was. And it's not the green ring, it's the width ring. So look at this. We got a green circle, and we got, do you see these two little white knobs on the end? And when you mouse over it just right, they kind of get thicker. That means when you get on the green ring, you can grab it and just start dragging, and you can start reducing the width. So let me play that for you. We're going to have the hi-hats far left and the snare far right, but we're going to start bringing them in. Check this out. We can push it all the way back to mono. Or we can spread them out a little bit. Now, cool, right? You can even grab the edges, just one of the white chunks here, and you can move that if you want to just dial in the right width of it. Now, what you can also do, watch, let's make it fairly less wide. Now watch what happens when I start panning. You can maintain the relationship of the two sides. You can maintain that specific width, but then you can move that width around the stereo field. So this is how Logic is giving us the functionality of those two mono pan knobs. Cubase and Ableton, I think they don't have a width ring. They have just a horizontal bar, and you've got those two sides. You can move the width or just one of them or the other. But what's cool is on those, you can drag them past each other and you can flip the stereo image. So our snare will move to the left side and our hi-hats will be over here. You're just getting the mirror image. That's pretty sweet, right? Can we do that in Logic? The answer is yes. all we have to do is hover over our pan knob and command click. Watch the green ring. Now it's an orange ring. Just to prove it to you, now we should have hi-hats to the right and snare to the left. We do. So that's pretty nifty. Now, one more trick, just so you know this, on Logic, on pretty much the faders and any knobs, you can just option click. Let's say, let's just jack this all up. We want this width and we want to push it all the way over, we want to push it over here. And we're like, oh man, I don't want to tweak all this. I want to start over. Just option click. Boop, we're all the way back to the start. That's the difference between a balance knob and a stereo pan. Remember, the balance knob is giving you the functionality of 2 faders so you can eke the center of that image around. It's not meant to pan real far because you start losing information because you're balancing volumes. A stereo pan is giving you the functionality of the 2 mono pan knobs. That lets you take the sides and bring them in to wherever you want, move them around, widen them back out. Stereo pan is 2 mono pan knobs. Balance is 2 faders. That's the key difference. So please make sure that you know you can right click and get to that hidden stereo pan knob, because if you're just using balance knobs, you're going to lose so much information in your overheads, in your double tracked guitars. Man, that's a huge mistake. Now, in Logic Pro at least, you might be thinking, man, Apple really should make a global setting so we can default to stereo pan knobs instead of balance knobs. Too bad we can't do this, Apple. But what we can do is create a mix template, meaning we'll create a blank project with all of our most commonly used tracks for various instruments. We're going to preload them with the plugins that we always use, and then we're going to carefully switch every balance knob to stereo pan. Save that and launch every new mix project using that mix template. Now, if you want to know why when you're panning with a mono pan knob or even a balance knob, why when you look at the meters, the direction that you're panning towards, that channel will just incrementally creep up in volume on the meters, but you can't hear a difference. That's because of the pan law, and I've got a video about it right here. You need to make sure you check that out because you need to go into your DAW's global settings and make sure it's using the correct pan law option, because there's 7 of them and only one of them is right for almost every single mix engineer. I explain why and I tell you which one's correct. Check it out if you don't.